day. You learn how to do to the best of your abilities. Anyways, welcome to the Ignition News. It is April. It is May 11th. Good Lord, 511. 51126. I'm sure there is something there. Let's see. Some important things happened today in history. Let's go ahead and go over that. It's probably my favorite part of the show, learning about important days in history. In 1846, President James K. Polk requested a declaration of war against Mexico. Do you remember? Do you remember when presidents used to go to Congress and ask to go to war? Interesting. This move was a calculated act of expansionism, and it serves as a reminder of how the state, under the system of capitalism, imperialism, uses expansionism to consolidate power. Look, now we have basically Venezuela as a subtweet state. In 1894, the Pullman strike began. In 1927, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences was founded. This was framed as a celebration of art, and it marked the formal consolidation of the film industry into a corporate structure. And since 1928, they've just been basically doing remakes of the same movie over and over and over again. Let's see. It is the 131st day of the year. There are 234 days left in the year. And forgot to click on Substack. That's okay. It's National Eat What You Want Day, which is kind of cool. So just want to throw that out there. What else? It's National Twilight Zone Day. And it is, that's I'm not going to give it a plug to a corporation there. That was clearly a corporate holiday. Not going to say it out loud. Salvador Dali was born on this day. Martha Graham was born on this day. Question for you. Why did the order talk to the ice cream cone? He was looking for a scoop. That was not bad. That one's not bad. The dad jokes are refining. Good morning. I have a few stories to talk about, but I also just want to talk about a little anecdotal story from this weekend. One of my videos on the internet broke contamination, and let me back up a little bit. I've been talking about some things I've been finding out about our local library system. And if you've been following the show for a while, you know that one of my favorite tools in democracy is open records. And I filed some open records to get some information about the library system and how they're utilizing some grant funding for 3D printers. I want also everyone on the show here. Part of that was that my son was trying to use 3D printers. Thank you to everyone on the show. He actually raised a bunch of money to be able to do that. Long story short, something's up with the library system, and one of these videos broke contamination, and it broke contamination into the worst possible. Look at this AI summary: discussing historical events like the Mexican-American War. No, and it broke contamination and ended up in the library's subreddit over on the website Reddit. And oh my God, that was the worst possible outcome. Because then I had just hundreds of librarians just very, very angry with me. And, I had an interesting weekend of kind of going back and forth on this topic. And I learned a couple things. And, my biggest overall takeaway from this that I got is I do like to reflect. I'm never wrong, but sometimes there's more information available to us that we have to learn from. So I did learn from this. And one of the things I learned from this is that whether that is because of No Child Left Behind, or whether that is because of book bans, whether that is like Moms for Liberty, our libraries have been on the front lines of a lot of shit, really, without a lot of support from their administration. And so our librarians have had to deal with literally people trying to ban books and people trying to use libraries as forms of political institutions, combined with obviously decreases in funding, all of those kinds of things. And what's happened is our librarians have been forced to become basically mental health counselors. They've been forced to become political activists. They've been forced to become, homeless shelters. They have been forced to be at the center of a lot of things. Throughout this process, I learned about something called vocational awe. And I remember remember this quote from somebody that I was reading, and there's like, well, if I don't solve this problem with this homeless person in my library, there's no one else that can do it. And that really stuck with me. But the reality is, our librarians should not have to be mental health counselors. Our librarians should not have to be housing advisors. They should not have to be family counselors. They should not have to be babysitters. Libraries are places where people can access public information, entertainment, services, technology. And it is not fair of us to continue to demand these types of things of the public officials at our libraries. And, for what it's worth, I think that my critique, my investigation of the library system was not viewed favorably, especially by librarians. But I would just say, and this might make me a little unpopular right now, if you are in that type of work and you're at a place where you have sort of become disgusted with the public, what I would say is, as much as I support libraries, as much as I continue to advocate for libraries, I think we have to consider what is the help that you're doing to the institution and to the public if you have become so disillusioned that you now hate your patrons. And I think that's a fair question. And that's both sides of the conversation. I'm covering this as diplomatically as possible. I realize that my investigation of the libraries could be viewed as antagonistic, but also I'm not going to back down, because all of our institutions are subject to the same accountability. They're all subject to the same accountability. And what I did learn from this is it's actually much worse than I thought. So as I investigated this, as I started digging in, I started getting messages from people in the Las Vegas library system. And what I found is, what I've always known is, this is not a problem with individual librarians or people who work at the desk at the library or the people who clean those facilities or try to maintain them. This is a problem with the administration, the library administration specifically. Kelvin Watson, the head of the Las Vegas library system, took Super Bowl tickets valued at $9,000 a piece during the 2024 Super Bowl. This is in the same library system where the public librarians would be subject to discipline if they were to take a $41 gift. There is a maximum $40 gift threshold for anyone in the library district. But Kelvin Watson took $9,000 Super Bowl tickets. By the way, he was so greedy that he went back and emailed through Leo Segura to ask the NFL for another $9,000 ticket, and then photographed himself in a fancy suite wearing I forget the football team, but wearing a football jersey. And I think it's an excellent example of corruption at the top of the system. If the NFL gave Super Bowl tickets away to the library, I think that the library should have auctioned it off for a charity, maybe raised some money for books, or possibly maybe they could have auctioned them off or raffled them off to the staff, people who don't make $250,000 a year getting a car allowance to be the library executive director. But also, I learned that that Kelvin Watson was embroiled in a scandal around basically selling the naming rights to a new library. Another thing we'll talk about later. And then finally, Kelvin Watson, the library's executive director, gutted DEI at the library. After the Trump administration came into power, Kelvin Watson completely gutted the DEI programs that actually were a big part of him being named Librarian of the Year. So these are difficult conversations. They're tough conversations, but they are necessary. And the fact that we've been taught that institutions like the library are good does not mean that those institutions are perfect. And it does not mean that they should be subject to a lack of oversight. In fact, they should be subject to more oversight. If you can't hold the institutions that you love accountable, how are you ever going to hold the institutions that you can't stand accountable, like Congress or the mayor or the governor? So that's my rant. A bunch of librarians are mad at me, but I'm not mad at you, and you can be mad at me, but I'm still going to fight for you. I'm still going to push to make sure that your working conditions are better, that our community demands less of you and provides more for you, and that administration in library districts, whether that's in Las Vegas or any community, are held accountable, especially for things about ethics. Someone who is running your public library system that is willing to take a gift several hundred times more than the value that they are legally allowed to, well, not legally, that they are by policy allowed to take, I have serious questions about that. And yes, I have questions about a library district and how they spend money when the person at the top is so willing to have blatant ethics violations. And I think that that sort of systemic rot, that ethical rot, it starts at the top and it cascades its way down. And I get it. But the thing about making change in any democracy or any system or any community is sometimes that change is difficult. Sometimes it's painful. And sometimes going through the process is difficult. But you can't back down. And so that's my opening rant of the day. Let's get into the stories today. I have 3 stories today. The first one, they're actually all pretty simple stories. But the first one is actually about the nuclear codes. 36 neurologists, psychologists, forensic mental health professionals, some of them were Republicans, some of them Democrats, all of them put their names on a public statement using the word urgency. The conclusion of these 36 professionals is that the president of the United States is mentally unfit to be the president of the United States. And that part of the sentence should be concern, even if you're not interested in the diagnosis. What comes next is, I think, the story worth covering. This man carries sole, unchecked authority to launch more than 5,000 nuclear warheads, and no one can stop him. The statement was entered into the congressional record by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and Jack Reed of Rhode Island, and it describes what the physicians are calling a rapidly worsening, reality untethered, increasingly dangerous decline. This is not some sort of commercial on television, a political attack ad. This was documented evidence from scientists, neurologists, and mental health professionals. Here's what they categorized: disorganized speech, tangential rambling, factual confusions, sudden unexplained reversals on major policy, episodes of apparent solemnness during critical public proceedings. These are their words, the words of professionals. Last week, the president told the world he had stopped a nuclear war between Iran and Pakistan repeatedly, except he kept saying Iran and India. Dr. John Gardner, former Johns Hopkins professor, said what the rest of us were thinking out loud. He said, and I quote, it's one thing to get a name wrong. It's another thing to entirely confuse the countries themselves. Of course, this administration and the president also claimed that he resolved a conflict between Cambodia and Armenia. Those are 2 nations which are 4,000 miles apart. Days before that, he was taking credit for ending the showdown between Azerbaijan and Albania when he apparently meant Armenia. And he did not notice. The worst is that no one in the room was willing to correct him. The White House response to the doctor's statement, which was entered into the congressional record, was that the president is the sharpest and most accessible president in American history. Here is what Tucker Carlson had to say. Tucker told administration officials to figure out the codes on the nuclear football. Tucker Carlson, this is a person who campaigned for the president. I obviously think that he's campaigning to be president in 2028. Tucker Carlson is allegedly telling people inside of the Trump administration to try to get the nuclear codes before something catastrophic happens. Doctors, of course, are calling for the 25th Amendment, but that would require the cabinet, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, that would require them to act. Then they would also have to get a majority vote in Congress. Every time someone tells you that it's not a big deal, he's just joking, I want you to remember that this man has the sole authority to use those 5,000 nuclear weapons, and the doctors are concerned. Here's the next one. Speaking of Tucker Carlson, one of Tucker Carlson's besties, Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's a little bit of a fight happening inside of the progressive left right now. AOC is getting a lot of headlines because of an interview that she had at the University of Chicago last week. When the conversation turned, as it seems to be turning all the time, to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who obviously has broken with Trump on the Epstein files, with Gaza. You had Bernie Sanders said that MTG was a good Republican. Ro Khanna praised her for her willingness to define leadership. Dropsite News wrote that Greene had sacrificed her political career to stand up against Trump and the Epstein class. But AOC did not see it that way. She said flat out that she does not trust Marjorie Taylor Greene on what is good for Gaza and for the country. She called her a proven bigot and an anti-Semite, and she says she does not think it benefits the movement to align the left with white nationalists. A lot of people lost their minds about this. Here's my read on this. You can disagree on this, but hear me out. The impulse to find allies whenever you get them is a real thing. I completely understand. When someone, when someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene breaks from Trump and the rest of the Republican Party is unwilling to do so, the tendency to sort of open up your wings and let them into the fold is pretty strong. But there is a difference between acknowledging this and building a coalition around a person whose entire political brand was constructed on the dehumanization of the people that we're trying to fight for. This is not a purity test, right? This is just simply one person, one politician drawing a line. Of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene had something to say about that. She said that AOC refused to vote for her, Marjorie Taylor Greene's, amendment to stop Israeli funding. That is not true. AOC opposed it, arguing at the time that the amendment did not slow the flow of offensive weapons and munitions into Gaza. You can disagree or agree with that call, but this fight is now very visible and very public. This AOC versus MTG debate actually reveals something. It reveals that the left does not have a coherent view of power. Even at this time when we are facing this dramatic assault on American democracy, the political left, basically everyone left of the red hat, has no idea who they are, what our coalition is, what our message, our goal, and who our allies are. They have no idea. Meanwhile, the President of the United States, meanwhile, this administration ravages the country, our democracy, and our treasury unchecked. And now even Tucker Carlson is playing the Peter Magyar playbook. People say, oh, Tucker Carlson and Peter Magyar are not the same. Okay, it doesn't matter. J.D. Vance and Viktor Orban are not the same, but J.D. Vance and Donald Trump ran the Viktor Orban playbook with Project 2025. And actually, people look at Peter Magyar, who won the election in Hungary, right? He overthrew Viktor Orban. People, I think, falsely assume, okay, so Peter Magyar beat Viktor Orban, he's on the left, but that really nothing could be farther from the truth. Peter Magyar is actually, politically a lot closer to someone like Rand Paul than he is to someone like Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders. What that means and why I think it's important is you've got Tucker Carlson out here running a playbook on the American people that is not at all dissimilar to what Magyar did. Magyar didn't openly go out on the media, because he couldn't, by the way, and go after Orban, because he probably would have been in trouble. What he did instead is he went to the communities of Hungary that were affected by the government corruption, and he started saying, hey, one of the friends of this administration got all the contracts for the street lamps. Where's your street lamps? They got their $2 million, but your street lamps aren't working. And he went from town to town to town, highlighting the corruption, which was in many ways like we are seeing right now. Everyone knows inherently that there's massive trillions of dollars worth of insider trading happening right now. But the only one that was held accountable was this soldier who apparently bet $400,000 on the Poly market. Everybody knows, everybody can see what is happening right now. Everybody. But instead of the left coherently talking about this, instead of Schumer talking about this or Hakeem Jeffries talking about this, what do we have? Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And when someone on the left does speak out about it, someone like Hassan Piker or AOC or Bernie Sanders, then they circle the wagons around them. The political left does not have a coherent message right now. And what happens is in that gap, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, people like Tucker Carlson will come into the conversation and they will say things like, hey, we need to stop funding munitions to Israel. And because no powerful elected Democrat is willing to say that, the people who are not necessarily aligned politically, because I mean, really, the Democratic Party has what, 28% approval right now? People are looking around in the dark to find something, someone who hears their struggle. It's clearly not the president. They're waking up to that. But if someone like Tucker Carlson gets up and says, hey, why are we allowing this foreign government to interfere with our politics? Why does this country have access to universal education, universal health care? Why is it that their roads are paved? Why is it that their hospitals are beautiful? Why is it that their airports are well funded? And why is it that you are struggling every single day? If someone like Tucker Carlson has 2 years or 3 years to rebrand himself while no one on the left is saying anything, then Tucker Carlson is going to win. Tucker Carlson is going to be your next president. And I think that he's either going to select Thomas Massie if Massie loses his election. If Massie loses his election, Tucker Carlson is going to take that loss as a spring point to platform Thomas Massie as having been persecuted by the Republican establishment. And he's going to make Thomas Massie his running mate. Tucker Carlson will run for president with Thomas Massie. If Thomas Massie wins, I still think it's a possibility. But if Thomas Massie wins, then I think Tucker Carlson goes with someone like Joe Kent or someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the arrogance of the Democratic Party right now is whenever you talk to someone of prominence in the Democratic Party, they will tell you that the Democratic Party has a deep bench. They really think that. They really think that the Democratic Party has a deep, sustainable political bench. But look no further than the state of California. California should be and is often largely is considered the largest liberal bastion of policy for Democratic politics, not just in the country, but the entire world. And when you look at the weak bench that they have for their Democratic governor, who is essentially the figurehead of the Democratic Party, the Democratic governor of California should be the leader of the Democratic Party in terms of the size of the state, the political infrastructure, the money, the philosophy, left-leaning policy. And they're deciding between Katie screams at her staff Porter, a billionaire, Tom Steyer. This is their choice, a billionaire. And I think I'm saying that right. A guy who took money from Chevron. In the most left, in the biggest, most left-leaning state, allegedly, in the country and in the world. There is no bench. There is no Democratic bench. Every time someone progressive and powerful begins to ascend in popularity, the machinery of the DNC squashes them. They did it to Bernie. They tried to do it to AOC. They tried to do it to, really everyone on the squad. They tried to do it to Graham Plattner. Before I get on to the last story of the day, I do want to just briefly talk about Graham Plattner. And I want to be super clear for everyone in my audience. I've been really watching the Plattner campaign for some time. I know that some people have some issues with some of the things that he said in the past, both on Reddit, with his tattoo, his history. But I have been watching Graham Plattner talk to voters in Maine. I've watched dozens of hours of footage of him directly, like literally videos of people on TikTok filming him themselves in the audience. And you can have your own opinion about Graham Plattner's past, his history, his remarks, his tattoo. That is for you to decide. But what is unquestionable to me is that Graham Plattner knows how to talk to working class people. And when they talk to him, he convinces them. I haven't seen an instance where Plattner has sat down with even a Republican and has not convinced them to at least consider his campaign. And of all the things in your political lifetime in the last 10 years, I would propose to you that if Graham Plattner, well, he's going to win the Democratic nomination. But if Graham Plattner wins the Senate race in Maine, it is going to be a lightning bolt and a deep fracture in the DNC. It may actually destroy the DNC because it will have proven that the DNC no longer has the political muscle to stop ascendant progressive candidates, even those with interesting, challenging, or problematic pasts. If Plattner wins in Maine, it will be the decline of the DNC and the eventual, if not restructuring, dissolution. And I want to do every single thing I can to make that happen. Because in the gap of that, what is not going to happen is we're not going to have election victories from moderate Democrats. We're just going to have more Tucker Carlsons, more Joe Kents, more Marjorie Taylor Greens, because they're smart enough to know what to say. My last story today is just briefly about this. We'll have to cover this in the next show, but I have been talking for months now about the fact that the president intends to interfere with the midterms. We don't have to guess that anymore. They don't even have to do anything illegal. The president of the United States and the GOP have been successful in their efforts to gerrymander. They took the bait. The Democratic Party took the bait. The strategy was to start this gerrymander war in Texas. Democrats took the bait of the gerrymander war. Then they went to California. That created a permission structure for the rest of the Republicans in states all over the country to begin to execute their wildest dreams about gerrymandering. Then, of course, you have two cases from the Supreme Court, one in 2019 and this most recent one, which gutted the Voting Rights Act. And if you don't yet believe, my last really challenge for you today is to go look at how the maps are shaping out. The Democratic Party is not going to win the gerrymandering war. They're just not going to win the gerrymandering war. And now you have the president announcing on Sunday, he said on Truth Social that Republicans are going to deploy what he is calling the Election Integrity Army to every single state for the 2026 midterms. They don't have to do anything illegal. They are already actively carving up states, and Democrats are sitting on their thumbs waiting to figure out what to do while they are storming the gerrymander. I don't know what the term to use there is, but while they are actively gerrymandering the shit out of this country. The solution there is not to gerrymander more blue states. The solution is to find those people in your communities who represent the policy that you believe in, to platform them, to support them, to give them money where you can, and when you can't, to make calls for them, to knock on doors for them, to encourage them, to help them be successful. As usual, our three stories center around power. Today, the question is, does the president have mental power? Does AOC understand the power of the Tucker Carlson, MAGA, Marjorie Taylor Greene ascendancy, and is she prepared to step into that place for the left? And then, of course, the question I ask, is it too late to reclaim our power in this democracy? Well, we shall see. We shall see. We have just a few months left to find and support those people who truly believe what we believe. I don't think it is over yet. I don't think it is time for lights out for American democracy. But this is the time for you to get active, to get involved. You may not have another chance, and the chances that you have in the future may look very different than they look right now. Elections in Hungary, they had elections. They were free and fair, as they say. There's a term for what's happening now. Electoral authoritarianism. There's other terms for that as well. The playbook is happening exactly as they designed. We are still having elections, are we not? No one stopped or suspended the elections, but when you successfully gerrymander enough districts in Congress, what happens? You have a Congress which does not look like the electorate. You have a president who increasingly does not win with the total or who wins via the electoral college instead of the popular vote. And you have a country ruled by oligarchs. But it is not too late to push back. It is May 11th. Go out into your community and find your fighter. support them, lift them up, knock doors for them. We'll see you back. Thanks for tuning in. Good stuff.